right, we are back here on the podcast. Hard Knocks Week 4 recap here as the Jets season winding down here on the Hard Knocks season here. Join me today to break down episode 4 of 5. Great friend of the podcast, Alan Austin is back. Alan, how are you?
Mike, how are you, sir? It's good to be back, and it's been a fun season of Hard Knocks so far.
Yeah, it absolutely is here. I'm very glad I was committed to covering it weekly on the podcast because these are some of the most fun segments I've had in a while.
Yes, it's a fun one for sure, and when just right off the bat when it was announced the 4 teams that could potentially be on Hard Knocks, the Jets were the obvious choice, and I'm glad it worked out that way.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out that way too. And I'm curious next week. I know we've had Hard Knocks in season the past few years. I wonder if we actually have a willing team to do it because those are fun as well.
They are fun, but last year's was a downer because the Cardinals hit the rough patch at the exact time the show was starting up. So week after week, it was Liev Schreiber discussing how to rebound from a loss.
Yeah, I don't think they won a game when they're actually in the season.
It was rough. It was a rough season, and being able to watch it, we knew that the GM and head coach were on their way out after that.
Yeah, I do think if I had to guess, I think the Commanders will be the in-season pick because I feel like there might be one of the things where they kind of secretly did a little handshake. Hey, you're sold. Let's get you guys on the in-season Hard Knocks. It's sort of we need something to fill this slot.
That would not be the most exciting team because I don't think they're poised for a good mid to end of season, and I think Rivera's on the block. So I think we might just have a repeat of last season if that's indeed the case.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. But let's talk about the current season. We're not here with the Jets. So give me your general take on this episode 4, which is the last preseason game, and a lot of fun stuff happened here.
It was a good episode. I think so we'll break it down some of the individual stuff. My overall take is that this team has all the pieces to succeed. Whether or not they will is yet to be seen. But if there's any indication that final preseason game with Rodgers on the field, teaming up with Wilson and others, then they should be in pretty good shape. As for all the other stuff, we'll break it down individually. But I thought it was a good episode. I thought there was one moment that should have been on next week, which was a little shocking that they just kind of threw it in at the end this week. But overall, I thought it was a fine episode.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun here. Obviously, this week I feel like it's more of a return to classic Hard Knocks where we got to look at some guys in the bottom of the roster trying to fight to make the team. Because the past 3 weeks have really been about the stars for the most part.
Yeah, and of course, if you follow the waiver wire and the roster transactions, there are spoilers here in play. But even that aside, it's still good getting to know the guys and seeing what their life stories are. And most of the time, a lot of fans will follow these guys who get cut and see what their next career moves are. And one instance last year with the Lions, Khalil Pimpleton, he wound up signing with the Giants and he just got cut from the Giants. So that's just some name, sometimes these names are more, they're better off in terms of their brand and who they are, known to the public for being on the show, even if they get cut. So it's not, there are some bittersweet elements to these things.
Yeah, Jeff fans are hoping that one of these guys doesn't become the next Danny Woodhead. I remember was the star the last time they were Hard Knocks, and he gets cut late and ends up in New England for a couple of years.
Yeah. Star is it's a gracious term to throw around Danny Woodhead, but in context of guys who get cut, certainly.
Yeah, more like he's a star of Hard Knocks, not like a star on the Jets.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
Yes. So obviously, one of the big things here is a little Rodgers light the past few weeks. You get more Aaron Rodgers this week. We get obviously some goofy stuff here, like it's just the wired earbuds and his whole thing about how you get all the gamma rays in your ear, in your brain if you wear the AirPods, which I don't subscribe to. Obviously, he has his own things, but always interesting to see Rodgers sort of in the practice when he's getting angry when things are going wrong, then watching him coach the guys along, and then they get better as the practice goes on.
Yeah, and as a non-Jet fan, and a non-Aaron Rodgers fan per se, it was good that this week that they finally let the edit show some of his idiosyncrasies, like some of the stuff that's made him a public figure over the last years, which whether it's COVID vaccines or, his belief in UFOs and this, that, and the other thing, we finally got a little glimpse into that side of him, which they've hid from us, because I'm pretty sure the NFL wants to market him on this show as Superman almost, as the old vet who the league loves. And I'm glad we finally got to see a little bit of the side of Aaron Rodgers that we all know that they'd kind of been hiding. And Wilson's reaction to it was what we all kind of think, which is just, okay, whatever you say, Like, it wasn't necessarily a, oh my God, you're right, I believe in you. It was like, okay, that's that guy's take, which I think is how the general public usually feels when Aaron Rodgers says something. So I'm glad they showed that side of it. And as for him in the practice, he should be getting mad. He should be, this is a guy who, for the most part, has avoided practices and preseason for the last 5-6 years. So the fact that he's here, he should be here. So seeing him get mad and want to motivate the guys and teach them, that's what every Jet fan should be in love with right now. So I think really he was doing what he should be doing. And, to give him any props other than that is just, I think, fanfare. So it's good to see your star veteran quarterback leading the team.
I would agree with that here. I also go to the defensive line meeting a little bit here, so leads into the Tanzel Smart stuff here. Did you like the whole metaphor that Aaron Whitecott, the defensive line coach, does with the chain links and having each guy put a link on the chain? I won't be the weakest link on the chain.
So I don't want to sound overly negative, but there are a few things in sports I always found corny and kind of useless. And a lot of it's that motivational stuff. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes, it hits the right audience. But a lot of times I think it's just hot air nonsense. And that's what I felt about this one. I thought this one was weird, asking a bunch of dudes to build a chain when you're about to cut some of them and have them say they're not the weakest link. I found that to be odd. I just found it to be a weird motivational for the sake of doing motivational stuff. I think there's a lot of that in the football world. I think there's a lot of that in the sports world. But I think sometimes coaches believe their own, hype a little bit when really it's about putting together a game plan and making sure everyone knows how to execute it rather than some of this rah-rah motivational stuff. I thought having a bunch of dudes build a chain was weird. I was not a fan of that.
Speaking of something I think can be, of course, a little corny if you're not in the mindset of it. I forgot to mention this top here. Like, what do you think about the open where we had the montage that was reminiscent of the Sopranos intro with Saleh?
So that was probably the most I've liked Saleh this whole season, the Sopranos-esque, and good on HBO for using their intellectual property to put something like that together for when you have the Jets and Saleh. That was my single favorite part of the episode, just because I'm such a huge Sopranos fan. So I was a big fan of that.
Yeah, it was really a lot of fun. I did enjoy that here. I also will mention here, we get from the defensive line side, we get I think a good spot with Tanzel Smart, who's been a star of the show. We get him week one about the Carcucci board, and he has the shirt on saying I like Carcucci. He's basically having all the defensive line over him. Putting together the charcuterie board for the defensive linemen when they're hanging out at his house was fun.
Yeah, it was a good idea by production to set that scene up. It was fun. It was cute. And people talk about Tanzel Smart, but I've really liked Solomon Thomas throughout this season. He's got a sense of humor. He seems to be someone who's misunderstood because he was kind of a draft bust. So I'm rooting for him. That's the great takeaway for me, is rooting for Solomon Thomas this year, because I really enjoyed, anytime he's on screen.
Yeah, I also did like that he was basically trying to turn like deli coconuts into roses for the charcuterie board. That was funny.
Loved it.
Yeah, I did love it here too. How'd you think about also, we get from there, we get Nathaniel Hackett meeting for the offense where they're obviously going into the red zone stuff. He's like, hey, let's work on celebrating together here. How did you like that?
I like that. I do think, and he pointed this out, that Izzy did it. And I've always found it super odd when your teammates come to run to celebrate and you run the other direction in your own soccer move. I totally enjoyed the team celebration. Definitely enjoyed that. And Hackett's one of the big takeaways. I could see why his personality didn't work as a head coach, but having him as the coordinator and getting to, kind of let his personality shine. I enjoy watching him every week. I think he's kind of, he doesn't take himself too seriously and he likes to have fun. And I think ultimately this is a game everyone's playing. And I like that. I really enjoy Hackett's mindset. And I think he's much better served as a coordinator.
Yeah, I think he and Jeff Ulbrich have both been very gotten their stocks boosted way up by this show. I mean, you see, I think you're right about Hackett, where maybe he's a little too goofy, quirky to be a head coach, but coordinator wise, I feel like he's perfect in that spot.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Let's go to now. We get to the rookie receivers here. We get some stuff from the bottom of the roster here. We get the bromance between Jason Brownlee and Xavier Gibson, who, spoiler alert, both make the team and also we'll see this next week here. We get their little bit of competition here, and then we get follow up on Jerome Couch. Feel the production threw in after his breakout moment in the rookie show last week and gets the shout out from Eminem. So Was it about learning about the rookie receivers and try and make the Jet roster?
Loved it. Loved it. This is what Hard Knocks usually shines with, and they did so yet again here. I hated the cutting of Cap as a throwaway at the end of the episode. That's what I teased before. You have a chance next week to look at the three receivers and get the positive and negative, and you just kind of chuck the negative just because he was cut 24 hours after the preseason game. Like, get in there, get that meeting room, and package it together with the other guys getting accepted onto the team, especially after we sit there and it's heartbreaking to see Cap's family in full decked out Jet gear in a group picture just to see him get cut. And then, and this is, the narration says to make it here is tough. And it's like, well, now you're crapping on him. So I thought it was like a tough ending to Cap's journey. And I really wish it extended to next week with a little bit more of a kind, hand guiding it, if that makes sense. I'm interested to see what you thought.
Yeah, I think the thing you remember here with this one, remember we heard the rumors prior to the season the Jets were going to be very tight about what kind of access they allowed Hard Knocks and that they were not big fans of showing people get cut on screen. So they want to have made something more production at their hands tied where they said, we're cutting Cap, you can't show it, so you have to, if you want to make a character, just have to mention that he's not on the team anymore.
Rough. Hated that. So whether it's the Jets' decision or something that couldn't be done, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I expect it's more a Jet decision than a Hard Knocks decision. Hard Knocks has had no problem showing guys getting cut in the past.
Oh, Hard Knocks would have no problem showing everything. So yes, you're right. It's a Jet decision.
Yeah, so speaking of Jets now, we'll go to the preseason game. It's funny I got you as a Giant fan on here for the Jets-Giants preseason game. How was this game did you actually watch last week?
Not much. It's still preseason. It's hard for me to get invested in preseason football when, none of the stars are playing. Tommy DeVito's not even on the team, and he quarterbacked most of that game. It's not a great look for the Giants with Jihad Ward's shenanigans. How do you say to Aaron Rodgers, I've never heard of you? He just looks like a fool. So I wasn't pleased with that. It was annoying. Rodgers said I gave him something that was uncomebackable, and he was right. And Ward definitely pushed him well after, and he should have just let it be. Bad luck.
Yeah, this preseason game, I watched some of it at a barbecue, so I didn't really pay too much attention to this stuff here. The Randall Cobb blindside block was definitely a funny segment here when Rodgers was joking around hey, he's getting all his money from training camp on that block.
Yeah, that was fun. I've liked Cobb in this season. I mean, it's interesting to see that, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, he's a veteran, he's been around a long time, but Cobb has been one of the veterans who doesn't suit up all the time, he's kind of coasting, and it's all because of Rodgers. I'm sure there are guys on this, who were invited to camp who might be a little bit more athletic than Cobb and can do more than Cobb at this point, but Cobb's not going anywhere because he's Rodgers' boy.
I mean, Rodgers is I think he's the godfather of one of Cobb's kids as well. So
exactly, yeah. But I've really liked Cobb's family dynamic. I thought they've been a nice touch to the show. His wife is very likable, so I've enjoyed seeing the Cobb mob on screen.
Yeah, it's very catchy, the Cobb mob.
Yes.
Yeah. You also brought up your Aaron Rodgers feud with Jihad Ward, which I think was very funny here because you're right. He gets irked because he does a two-hand shove well after the whistle here, and then at the end, I did think it was funny. Rodgers was talking trash and get the hell out of here. I don't know who the hell you are. I just think that was funny as Rodgers was punking this guy.
Absolutely. And for Ward to say, I don't know who you are back, just awful.
Yeah, I mean, he said to Michael Carter's I was like, that guy was lying. It says he had no idea who I am. Yeah. We also get a little bit of the first team defense here for the Jets playing on here. I did think, obviously, focus a lot on Sauce because Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor did try testing Sauce a couple of times here, and it was fun seeing him get fired. I was like, why are they throwing at me?
Yeah, and then Saleh had the good line, until you catch it and bring it back, they're going to keep trying, which I thought was a fun little motivating line right there. Obviously, Sauce did great knocking down the passes and defending, but I thought that was a good line by Saleh too. It helps reiterate that the job's not done.
Yeah. Does teach him a good lesson here. And then we go back to Tanzel Smart here. And then this is a point in this game where he gets injured early. He hurts his shoulder. And he's basically trying to play through the pain to make an impact on the roster here. And we could just tell that, poor Tanzel Smart is not the same after that shoulder injury.
No, it was heartbreaking. It was, and then they keep, cutting to his wife and child in the crowd. It's sad. he's the classic character has an uphill battle, because if you know anything about the Jets, you know how stacked their D line is, and the fact that he's been kicking around practice squads and stuff. You just know unless a miracle happens. So as soon as that shoulder injury happens, pretty much the nail is in the coffin, and it's heart wrenching as a fan rooting for Tanzel.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of put that in there to sort of tease the fact that he's not going to make the 53. He's sort of maybe, I feel like something we'll get to in a minute about my thoughts for next week here is that like some of these guys, I feel like we've seen a little bit. I think they're going to try and sneak some of them onto practice squads, so he might be one of them.
Yeah, I could see that happening, especially if he has a little injury. It's not like his options are going to be wide, so I could see the Jets bringing him back for sure. As for Cap, I've heard no rumblings that they're interested in bringing him back, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Obviously, these teams have 16-man practice squads, and obviously, like, if guys make the roster now, they're not guaranteed because obviously a lot of guys get cut at this point of the season here. So we'll see. Like, if you got even a guy like Jason Brownlee might not be safe. That's the point next week.
Absolutely. Especially as the roster, NFL teams need a couple weeks to also get their footing and see where they have weaknesses. Brownlee might be a cut because someone else gets hurt on the D line. You need to bring somebody in. Like you said, anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen here. And obviously, like, they've been using the end credit scene for some funny stuff here. Like, remember week 1, we got the film club with Nathaniel Hackett. Last week was Ralph Macchio. What do you think of discussion of the Broadway shows and the credits scene this week?
Perfect. It ties in New York. It ties in the Jets. It ties in the culture of the area. My biggest problem was that they all said Wicked was number 1. But that's just a personal choice. No, I loved it. Loved it. Thought it was a perfect, capture of New York and what we wanted to see as an audience. I was a big fan of it. Yeah,
I also think like they gave a lot of love to the Back to the Future musical. So like those people must have been very happy last night.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to Roger Bart, who's playing Doc Brown on Broadway.
Yeah, absolutely. The great Roger Bart. I believe he's from High School Musical fame, correct?
Roger Bart. Oh gosh, I mean, he's been kicking around Broadway stages for many, many years. Not sure if he was in High School Musical.
I thought he was. I was pretty sure he was. I thought he might have been like the coach on High School Musical or something. I'm not 100% sure.
It's possible.
All right. Well, even if he's not, he had a great Broadway run here. And let's get to some brass tacks here. Who is the MVP of the week for you in Hard Knocks?
So I think the MVP of the week was Xavier Gibson. Like, just watching his stuff, he has such a fun personality, laughing, kicking it with Brownlee. And then they show him in the preseason game lighting up the returns. I thought that was a well-rounded week, and I just really enjoyed his screen presence. 1A would be Brownlee because of their dynamic, but I think Gibson gets the edge because of the preseason footage. So I really enjoyed him this week. I thought he was an excellent, personality, great, seemingly a great guy. So to see him succeed was a lot of fun, and I'm rooting for him.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tanzel Smart for me because obviously the home segment was fun, and then he does give you a lot of effort. Even if he deserves big brownie points for playing through the shoulder and to try and make his way into the roster, even though he knew probably going in the very long shot to make it.
Absolutely, but there's always that hope, and that's the positives and negatives of sports. Every year we go in rooting for our teams. Most of the time they don't win at all, and it's kind of that same dynamic where you're hoping for the best and then the worst comes. So we as sports fans get it, and we feel the hurt with him.
Yeah, we certainly do feel hurt with him, and who knows, maybe he impressed another team. He ends up on somebody's roster.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Depends how that shoulder is.
Yeah, we'll see how the shoulder is here. And then we have 1 week left of Hard Knocks. It's obviously been a bit different the past few years when they got rid of the last preseason game. So I think I have a few things I want to keep an eye on for next week here. I think, number one, they did not mention Corey Davis retiring this week. I think that's going to be something that's brought up next week because I feel like that's their easy storytelling way to say, look, spot opened up. Now you get both Brownlee and Gibson on the roster.
Yep, that's a good touch. They haven't touched on Davis at all this season. Maybe he doesn't want to be on the show, but they have to mention it because that's definitely what you're saying. It definitely means that probably Brownlee is the guy who gets on because of Corey Davis's retirement.
Yeah, that's one thing to watch for here. I think the offensive line will be a big focus next week because obviously after the Giant game, they named Mekhi Becton the starting right tackle. Dwayne Brown returned to practice here. I think after we heard a lot in camp about how the offensive line struggled, especially I think in the second episode when Sal was ripping into them after the joint practice at Carolina, I think you get a nice payoff of look, like the group's back together and they're playing well.
I agree. I wouldn't be shocked if they don't touch on it, though, just because it hasn't been a huge storyline for the season. I think we're going to see way more Tanzel Smart next week. We're going to see, Rodgers bonding with the receivers heading into the season, especially Brownlee making the club and Gibson. And I think we're going to get a lot of Saleh just saying, lots on the line for me this year. I think it's going to be a lot more of that. But we'll see. We'll see.
I always expect some of the bigger names you haven't heard from yet. Like, I wouldn't be shocked we get a little more, like, a little bit up from Dalvin Cook next week, especially, like, he and Brees are practicing again.
I think we'll get that, too. I definitely think that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun seeing how the season wraps up, Alan. Thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. People want to follow you on social media. I couldn't do that.
Sure. Twitter's the best way to follow me. It's at Allen, ALLEN _Austin _. And Mike, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Thanks for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.